You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with your host, James Creviston.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. It's James. And today I have an amazing guest for you guys. If you watch Dry Bar, you've seen him there. It's amazing. He's a co-star of the Showtime special Going Native. He's also on Amazon Prime, like I said, Dry Bar. He has his comedy special there, Midlife Crisis. And he was the best of the fest at the 2022 Burbank Comedy Festival, which is right down the street from me. And was named one of the 25 Indigenous comedians to watch by Illuminatives magazine. Minneapolis Stars Tribune's Tom Horgan said that Marc's comedy tore the house down. Now, if you've watched that special, I 100% believe that. You always hear people go, "Oh, this person tore the house down. This person killed," and you go see him live, and you go, maybe they did, but. We watch that special, you watch Dry Bar, you watch this stuff, and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy is a murderer. And this is what's great about it is Marc is maybe the only comedian to with air, land, and sea credits. He's like the Navy SEAL of comedy, basically. Like he's performed Alaska Airlines passengers at 30,000 feet. He's toured 43 states, 11 countries. He's done comedy at sea for Carnival, Princess, and Holland America Cruises. Please give it up for Mr. Marc Yaffee. Welcome.
James, thanks for having me, man. Thanks for the great intro, too. I love that Navy SEAL of comedy. That it's so funny.
You should do that because, like, who could say that they performed land, sea, and air? Like most comedians, could say, "Oh, I've done cruises and I've done regular land stuff." But who's performing it at 30,000 feet? And also, you have to tell us that story because that's like super unique.
Yeah, I think now you got me inspired. I'm gonna have to figure a way how to do something in a submarine so I can go undersea credit.
Oh yes, don't get on that one that goes down to the Titanic. Don't do that one.
No, yeah, none of those little submersible. I was thinking about the Antarctica as another one, but I do know a friend of mine in Canada. He's a comedy magician, James DeSero, and he got booked at the station down there in Antarctica to do a show. I don't know how long it was, but it's on his credits. So I'm like, okay, that's been done. I don't think I'm going to get on the any space shuttle soon, so we'll have to leave it to a terrestrial. Yeah,
that's funny. So the plane thing, was it just like to calm people on an airplane, or was it a private gig in the airplane? Like,
it was a fluke thing. We were going up to do. My buddy Gilbert Brown and I were doing the World Eskimo Indian Olympics. We were doing a show in Fairbanks. This producer booked us on in conjunction with that. And they're super nice. If you've ever flown in Alaska, so I'm like, we should see if they'll let us announce the show. And so I went up there. She says, "Well, you're going to do some comedy for the passengers, then, right? If it's like you better prove you're funny if you're promoting the show." So I couldn't just like walk back to my seat, So I did about 10 minutes, and I think 30% enjoyed it, 30% could care less, 30% were annoyed, and I don't know about the other 10% were sleeping. So. They had no opinion, but yeah, it was fun. It's like doing a really bad corporate gig because you don't have the best sound and light, and then they had a real short cord, so I'm peeking around the little pony wall. You can see 2/3 of my head, which even though I got a big head, it wasn't quite the ambiance I was hoping for.
Yeah, and Fairbanks is fun. Little known fact. I mean, you won't know this, but other people know this. I was born in Fairbanks. That was where I was born. So
okay.
That recently, last year, my friend David Studebaker and I were able to go up to Fairbanks and do 2 shows up there. So we performed stand up in Fairbanks. So
were you like a military brat type thing, or is it?
My dad was stationed there. I was born there, and then we moved.
Yeah.
But, so,
my comedy mentor, his dad was in the Air Force. He's from Anchorage. Yeah. So surprising how many, Alaska's got a lot of comedy history, and as for small as the state is population wise, they support a lot of shows.
They do,
especially since the pandemic.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I always call it just Texas with snow because it just has that same feeling of like kind of very low key. Everyone's there to just kind of live their life and not bother anybody and just get along. But then there's snow and you're like, okay, well that's nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a live and let live environment, and as long as you don't give too much grief to the audience, you're just doing your stuff. They're pretty supportive. You get the occasional drunk like anywhere, but the shows have always been fun up there, and I think my my favorite show, we did a bar in Ketchikan, my friend Mark Price and I, and it was like 25 people, and it's like no one really showed up. The next night we like but we had it's the smaller gigs. This is the best time because it's just like such a surreal experience. And then I get to go up there quite a bit doing cruise ships. So not doing comedy in Alaska, but right along the coast, which is also a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So how did you get started in comedy? What was your road there? What was your journey? You already have a very unique background. You already have a unique life. How to get to comedy?
Well, I'd always had it in the back of my head that I love stand up and writing, and grew up on 70s and 80s sitcoms. And so I actually saw Sam Kinison in 1984, 85, right before he blew up at a student union in Cal State Northridge. My friends were going there, and like 30 people there. He just went on like, man, this guy's amazing. That was my first live comedy experience. Wow. And then it just kind of dormant. Became a DMV driving examiner. I worked for the state of California, and you're in the Santa Barbara area, right?
Yeah, I'm Ventura, close to like Ventura and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was a driving they call it LRA, license registration exam. I give driving tests in Goleta.
Oh, yeah.
Moved up, then I transferred up I lived in Northern California, and I quit working for the DMV, and my buddy talked me to open a driving school, taught traffic classes. People thought it was funny. And they said, "Oh, you should be a comedian." They're kind of like half joking. I'm like, "Well, I should get comics to teach at my school, start a comedy traffic school." I went to Laughs Unlimited in Sacramento, tried to recruit some comedians, ended up taking a class, and the teacher took a shine to me, mostly because he knew I had valid license and insurance, and he could take me on the road, not worried about, not making it to the gig, and just kind of took off from there. So 24 years later, into the 50-year plan, here I am.
That's amazing. No, that's a great way. The funny thing is, old school, like the old school comedy way is like, people would say, "Hey, do you have a car? Okay, cool. Come on the road with me." Right. Yep. It was like that way of like not vetting necessarily your stand up yet, because you were going to get better while you're on the road, but just kind of have somebody who you could trust and rely on to go on the road with you.
And I was horrible. I was lucky to get 10, 15 minutes of just painful comedy, and he had to cover the other time. He said, "I don't even worry about it." I said, "Well, I read the contract. I got to do 30 minutes. I barely have 12 minutes and 15." Yeah. So you kind of grow into it. And like, that's why I wonder now, if you're a Gen Z guy, and a lot of people don't have a license now. I'm like, well, how do you work your way? It's not easy to work your way in. So now you got to go viral instead, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different time frame. Even getting gigs is not the same way anymore. There's so much social media behind it, and so many. It's not even just who's funny, who's who's available, who's around, who's strong, it's just like, how many followers do you have, and you're like,
your numbers. That's right.
Yeah. You're like, oh man, I don't know. I think that'll shift in a couple of years where that won't be as big of a deal. Like, it'll still be one of those things where they go, "Hey, can we just look at that?" or whatever. But I think we're coming to a point where the viral portion is not as strong as they think it is, because I've seen people who have like 24,000 followers on Instagram, and they're like, we go to a show, we're booked on the same show, 2 people came out to see them, and 10 people came out to see somebody who has like 100 followers. You're like, that doesn't relate. Those numbers don't relate.
Sure. And it's really about your micro segment, or whatever you want to call it. It's just having the core audience, whether it's, a few hundred, a few thousand, that like are fervent, fans, and those people that'll go out of their way to find you. And it's not always easy to do that. When I was young, that was the whole thing. Oh, people get on Johnny Carson and they're famous overnight. That doesn't happen anymore. It's a new paradigm.
That's so funny, because my wife and I are watching the Comedy Store documentary that Mike Binder did. I'm trying to get him on the podcast too. We're watching it, and you can see that progression throughout the series as you watch. Like, yeah, Johnny was the way to go. Like, you could get like Freddie Prinze got on there, next thing, super famous on a big TV show. All this stuff happens. Now there is none of that. But then Mike Binder gets to the end of that. Spoiler for anybody who's not seen this documentary that was released in 2020. He gets to the end of it and says, now Joe Rogan is the Johnny Carson of comedy.
Yeah,
you go on Rogan, you can change your career overnight.
Yeah, and even people just trying to go down there and wait in line just to get a spot at the club. Yeah. It's unbelievable what he's done with Austin, and just when I like to see the shifting paradigms are fun to watch. It's a little hard, once you're think you got a lane, and now the lane, that lane,
Changes.
here comes a new lane, but it keeps, I think, keeps everybody on their toes. I think it's good for comedy. It just doesn't get static, and it doesn't depend on 2 or 3 gatekeepers. Now people are building their own fence and creating and building their own gate, which I think is awesome.
Now, as you got started in comedy, so you started in California, you travel across the country, you travel across the world. What's it like to grow like over this time period? Like you've seen comedy from Kennison's days to now. What is like that big change been like, and how have you adapted as you've dealt with the change in the comedy landscape?
Well, I think it was easier for me because I've always done so many different types of gigs.
Okay.
First of all, I did do a comedy class. I know some people are like, you can't teach comedy. Well, you can teach some technique. You can't teach people to write. You can't teach creativity, but you can teach, structure, how to introduce people, how to walk off, how to approach the stage, how to handle a mic, be a good host. So I got that was one of the early things I got. I think I was kind of raised right because like I said, I had a mentor, and I know your journey. You have a great mentor in Craig Shoemaker, and so if you can, I learned kind of the etiquette of the comedy, but then I did everything from one-nighters to a few clubs, and then I would do a lot of tribal events. Sometimes they're outside. I did a show on a rock in the Sierras right after they'd had a ceremony for one of the tribal members who had just passed away. So you just get thrown into these situations. I got on a cruise ship in year 3 of comedy. When I wasn't ready, I had 45 minutes.
Wow.
And I just tried it. The first show went great. Second show, same material, bombed. So it's really if you can get those learning experiences and actually glean the lesson out of it. Did you record this? What happened? Where'd you go wrong? So I think a lot of it was I paid attention. I was willing to take criticism and input and try to pay attention to what other the comics that had good habits and what they were doing and kind of how they made it. But mostly it was trial and error. I wasn't living in the city. I lived 2.5 hours from the closest club.
Wow.
I grew up in LA and then moved to a town of 3,000 people in Northern California, and so every gig was a road gig. So I couldn't really hang out afterward. I really wasn't in a scene per se. I was kind of this, people knew me, but I wasn't like with a clique. And so that, I had to kind of forge my own path, which was good and bad. And I always say, if you can get somewhere, even if it's not LA, it's Austin or Denver, and kind of integrate yourself with some people, but not get too dependent, because dynamics change, personalities change, but it's good to have a support system in comedy because as we know, it can be a pretty lonely and frustrating business. So
yeah,
it's what we can talk to.
Yeah, you need somebody. You need somebody who could call or text or whatever after a gig and say, "Man, this thing happened to me and it's crazy." You guys talk about it and laugh and whatever. I love when I get to travel with my buddy David Studebaker. He's also done Dry Bar as well, and so I did Bellflower on Saturday with Craig. And then I got on an airplane at 9 and flew up to San Jose and did a show at 7 on San Jose. And then we drove back to LA from San Jose. So in that small amount of time, we did 2 gigs and drove all the way back. Now my buddy David and I were just driving in the middle of the night down the 5 back to LA, just laughing about different stories and things like we catching up on sets and shows and what happened at that show and what happened at the show before and all this. And you just go, this is amazing. Like, this is something that most people will never experience. They'll never get to understand what it's like to be on the road with your friends or be in weird bars or weird venues or see the craziness of the rest of the world, right? Because most people just go work home, and maybe a vacation here and there or whatever and stuff. They never get to see the rest of the craziness in the world. And we live it all the time, especially you go on cruise ships. How many insane things do you see on a cruise ship?
And the nice thing is, depending on what cruise line I'm working for, like Carnival, you end up with another comic. Holland America, I work for, usually I'm the only comic on there. So it's not quite the same. You can talk to a guy in the band or one of the musicians. It's, but to be just hanging out with a comic and be able to share that, like you said, the stuff in the car, that's the funniest stuff that you'll never hear on stage. And probably my favorite, we do comedy because we love being on stage, but the funniest stuff is like you said, it's in the car, just driving when you're half asleep and trying to keep each other awake. Yeah.
That's exactly right. We were just like laughing about what happened at the gig. We were talking about other gigs that we hadn't caught up on yet. And then his birthday happened while we were driving.
This is Dave's birthday?
Yeah, it's David's birthday. We're driving. I look at the clock on the car and I go, "Hey man, happy birthday." Like, and he just starts laughing. He's like, "We're in this car driving back from San Jose, and like this is how I'm celebrating my 34th birthday." That's what he said. Like, this is how I celebrate. I'm like, "What a great birthday, right?" He's like, "Actually, yeah, it's amazing." So very happy and stuff.
Yeah, here's my giveaway thing that I'm thinking of an idea, and maybe someone will actually know someday. Is like, I think, they have these fantasy baseball camps and fantasy hockey team. I think if you could just take civilians and say, "Hey, we're gonna work with you on comedy. You're gonna write 5 minutes," and take them on the road for a week. Here you go.
Well, there's a thing in LA that's happening at the end of the year. I'm trying to get them on. It's a fantasy comedy camp. It's got like Jay Leno, Adam Carolla, Alonzo Bowden.
Serious.
It's amazing. Like, I'm trying to get connected with them because I would love to go cover this. This is the first year they're doing it. It's a company that used to do, or I think they still do, rock and roll fantasy camp. So they do all the rock and roll fantasy camps. Now they want to do a comedy fantasy camp.
Yeah.
It's their lineup. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like. I know I've met some of the people on their list and I know them or whatever, but it's like to go in a room and if you had Jay Leno, Adam Carolla, Alonzo, but like all these big dudes, and you just go, the amount of knowledge and just stories in this room is going to be amazing. So I'm trying to do that. I love that idea. The thing is,
but I was thinking about the roads. That's a whole different level. That's I'm more in the double A instead of the major league. Because think of that. Because like you said, that it's fun. That'll be awesome. It's going to be an amazing experience. But like you say, when you're in the car, you're at these little crap hole bars in Wyoming. You just experience this drunken cowboy passing out in the middle of your show. That's how do you don't get those same experiences in LA. But hey, yeah, it's all fun. Yeah.
So where are you based out of now? Where's your home base?
I live in Sparks, Nevada, by Reno.
Oh, I know where that is. I know. I used to live in Vegas. I driven through there and stuff. Now, do you go work out material somewhere? Do you do that all on the road? How do you keep building your act and acting stuff? Because it's got to be hard as much as you travel. It
is. That's one thing. There's some mics around here, and sometimes I get up and there's a lot. We have a Laugh Factory, so I might do a 5-minute spot and try to work on some new material. But mostly it's just running it in my head and just putting it out there and pack it in the middle of my set and see if I can shoehorn it in. And in Carnival, I've been doing a lot for them, and we're doing, you're doing maybe 10 to 12 shows in 7-8 days.
Wow.
Because we do back-to-back contracts that we'll come in the middle of the cruise. So the beginning, you'll do the end of one and beginning of the next cruise. So it's two sets of passengers.
Wow.
So a lot of times that's like they'll do they do a showcase night, and it's like you can just kind of throw the material out and just pack it in there. So that's fun. I mean, it's always fun to birth material. It's a little scary, especially if you haven't worked on it in a mic, and so I have to just kind of wing it sometimes. But when I'm home, I'm just so exhausted from the traveling and stuff. A lot of times I just I don't think I can get up and get out of the house and go over an open mic at 10 or so. I got to confess, I got a little lazy on that. I envy these guys that are, like if you guys in LA, New York, and they're getting 6 sets a week. And I never had that opportunity even back when I was younger because of my geographical location. So that hindered me a little bit, but I think I made up for it. I have all that free time in the car to write material and go over stuff in my head and listen to my recordings. And
that's always the best. Now, what is your writing process like? Do you just come up with a premise and work from there? Or do you just take a story and kind of distill it down to make it funnier and add punchlines? Like, what's your writing process for stuff?
I'll usually see something happen. I'll get a kind of a nexus of an idea. And I said, someone says something. I was like, I've been thinking about this. And then I'll start kind of ruminating on, okay, well, what happens there? What does this lead to? I kind of work in a flow state, as I don't really have a regimented sit down and write, 3 hours every day. So mine tends to come I find the best comedy comes in the quieter moments when I just got my head cleared and I'm driving or on the plane, and then just make sure I get the phone out and try to put it in, you get a new idea, write it down before you fall asleep or go to bed. Cause I've woken up and it's like, I know that was amazing. It's left my head and it's floating around in the universe somewhere. But
yeah,
I seem to get the most new material after I've done a chunk a week at a club or on a ship. And then when I'm like decompressing and stuff, will just all kind of, oh yeah, I didn't talk about that. I should talk about this. It's just usually I just spring it off of older material or just situations that came up.
Yeah, I like that. I've been doing a lot of things lately, working with Craig. I have this idea and I want to write it out, and I go and write out a joke, and make it whatever. And then as I talked to Craig, like he said, you got to tell more stories. You got to be more story oriented and talk
Mhm.
about that stuff and talk about real things in your life. And I'm like, I don't really want to talk. Like I tried to write things out before about my life and it just wasn't funny or didn't feel like it flowed right or whatever. He's like, well, just do it. So I found out that I have sleep apnea and I have to go get a sleep apnea test. So I was telling him a story in the car as we were driving because he was asking me about it, like what's going on with it. And I told him this whole story, and he's dying laughing as we're driving to the gig. He's like, "You have to do this on stage. Like, you have to talk about this." I was like, I'll do it another time. I need to write it and fix it because my thing is like I gotta make sure it works or whatever.
Wanna
He's like,
craft it.
yeah. He's like, no, go up tonight and just do it on stage. I'm like, okay. Now we're in Bellflower. We're in front of a packed house. I'm opening up
First time at the club.
your first time at that club,
You're
and I'm
trying to
like,
make a good impression. You want to do
yeah.
your material. Oh
You,
man, that's yeah.
and he's like, go do that. And I'm like, I don't even know where. So I just get up and I just start talking about it. And I just kind of talked about it the same way I talked to him about it. And they're just loving it. They're laughing and whatever. And I'm like, okay, maybe maybe this is the way I need to go. Like I need to be more in the flow state, right? I'm not really doing that. And I'm normally thinking like, set up punchline, tag. Got to like, well, how am I, I'm kind of building the blueprint. This just flowed. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's a fluke, right? When sometimes you do a joke, you go, that was a fluke, right? It was just a 1 in a million shot that doesn't really happen. I go to San Jose, I do the same joke opening murders. Right now, I've added more to it as I go. Then started doing
You say you
callbacks
opened with it too?
yeah.
That's awesome. That's really, really getting out there. Yeah.
Open with it. And then I did callbacks within my set from old jokes, call back to this new joke, just in that flow state. And it was amazing. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I have to do. So now I realize there's so many more stories that I can take.
Yeah. Well,
and
you
make
think
it
you
something.
took something personal,
Yeah.
awkward, uncomfortable, funny, relatable. It met all the criteria. They say
Yeah.
everybody, if they don't have sleep apnea, their girlfriend or their husband has sleep apnea, their grandma does, and they have, then the mask and just like everybody knows about it. So it's,
Yeah.
you hit all the buttons. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
It was the most terrifying thing to just like, because my thought was like, if I do it up front and I can I know how to get that first laugh, even if I don't get the rest of the laughs, I have the rest of my material and I can be okay, right? I could survive. So I was thinking, okay, that'll be fine. But when it popped and everything kind of went, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is eye opening. This is the way to move forward. And
Mhm.
the worst is when you know a joke should work, maybe that you've done like 100 times and it just dies. That's like the scariest moment I think on stage of going, all right, what do I do now? Because this joke works, every time. Now it's not working. Have you had that experience?
Actually, yeah. Oh, yeah. I had it last night. It's the
No way.
Springer joke. I did a tribal conference. It's a California tribal college, and they're there for like 4 days at this casino. And maybe the whole conference is only like 60 people, and maybe half of them showed up. There's only 30 people in this giant classroom/conference room. They're all spread out. There's no feng shui. I'm on the little portable stage, and I did this one joke. I'm just like, okay, now they're not laughing. I was like, so I just, I just I just went into crowd work. I just found something because it's just like, I got to change this immediately. Sometimes I'll just forge ahead. You're doing a corporate gig. Sometimes it's just punch the clock comedy. Just get through your set, and you don't have, there's not going to be there's no rescue plan. It's just like, hey, you know what? It didn't work. And if that happens, I tell people you can't bail on it after that one time, because if it's worked 99 out of 100 times, that one time is not a reason to dump that joke. So it's probably there was something else going on, or this group, you made a joke on something, they had an inside information, and this person suffered from whatever that situation was, and they all, they can laugh. That's always the interesting thing. It's like, well, there's a whole group dynamic behind that, especially when a whole group shuts down.
Yeah, that happened to me in Alaska. One of the jokes my closing joke is called "Feed to Bears," and I talk about how when I go, I want to be fed to bears or whatever, and it's a funny joke and everyone loves it. And Alaska it just died, and I was like, what happened? And I guess that does happen to people there.
Uh-huh.
And so the whole crowd shut down on me. And I was like, this is weird. It's never worked. And what's funny is I thought about making shirts because I've had people repeat that joke to me. But I was like, oh, I'll make shirts. I bet Alaska I could sell that shirt like that. No problem. I'm so glad I didn't make any merch for that or anything
Oh,
because it died.
you're
It was,
stuck with it. You can't sell it in the lower 48. They don't want to buy it. And
yeah.
now some poor kid in Sudan is wearing it when you donate it.
That's amazing. So people, when you do cruise ships, because this is one of those things that a lot of comedians don't know about. Like we all know getting booked in comedy clubs, we all know going on the road, bars, whatever stuff. Cruise ships are kind of like this magical thing that nobody really talks about. Or they go, yeah, I'm on cruise ships, but you don't really know the process. What is that like? What do you have to do? And you work for a couple of cruise lines. What's the differences there? What are the similarities? All that kind of stuff.
Well, the one similarity is the travel generally sucks. So, but that's partially on me because I live in Reno. So Reno doesn't have a lot of direct flights to Roatan, Honduras. Okay, let's say. So a guy that lives in Dallas or LA or Miami might make 2 flights. I'm doing 4 flights. I'm going overnight and hopefully not getting a middle seat because they gave me the itinerary in time where I was able to get on and get a seat assignment, which doesn't always happen. So the first process is getting a cruise ship agent, and that was a process there because you send submit and they take forever because they're getting bombarded, and then the agent says, "Yeah, I want to represent you." Now you're waiting because now they got to submit your stuff to the cruise line, and they're bombarded. But it's a general process is the cruise line's going to look at the material and say you're a fit for their demographic. So I got hired for Holland America right away because I work pretty clean. Hence, we're on the Clean Comedy podcast, and that worked fine. COVID happened. That agent, she was taking, I didn't really care for her commission structure. I wanted to say, I got to make, and so I had some switch to my new agents that were a little more fair on that. And they were both, one was a comedian and one ran a comedy club, Artist West. So they were a little more sympathetic to what I was doing. So I found a good agency fit. I got submitted to Carnival. The first time I submitted, they said I wasn't dirty enough.
Wow.
Yeah. And even farther, well, let me go farther back. I submitted my first cruise submission. One, I was just asked to do the ship. I told them I bombed the second show. It was just a test. I didn't have enough material. I knew it. I'll take a chance. Then I submitted to one of the larger agencies. Said, "Oh, we loved your material. You just got to do it without that racial stuff." Because I do a joke about the KKK and white supremacists and whatever. Send my next clip. Oh, they hated it. I went from they loved you to they hate it. Send it again. Nope, not interested. So
wow.
it took, it's just like anything in comedy. A lot of times you got to keep pitching, 4 or 5 times. I think I went through 5 or 6 agents. One guy was trying to book me, wasn't getting anywhere, and he wasn't really doing ships a lot. So I got rid of him. And so I finally found a good fit. Carnival, way different than Holland's. Carnival, you do multiple shows because they got Punchliner Comedy Club, whereas Royal and Holland and Princess Disney, you might do a few. They're not doing as many shows. Some are. I mean, I think Royal you might do one every night or every other night, but Carnival, you got to get on to maybe a clean show after you traveled all night, and then you maybe do a dirty show late night. So sometimes you're doing 2 or 3 shows after you've slept for like 2 hours.
Wow. And then how much time are each of those shows? Like, are you doing 45, you doing 60, 90? What is it?
It's most cruise lines, it's either 30 or 45. Some do a welcome aboard show, 5-10 minutes, but Holland is, they just changed theirs. So theirs used to be all pretty much 30 minutes. Now they're doing like an adult 40, clean 45 and an adult 30. But
wow,
again, cruise line, an adult show on Holland may not be the same as an adult show on Carnival. Carnival's
right.
a little more explicit, and some of the stuff I do in Carnival, I'm not going to do it on Holland because I don't want to, have some guy, getting on their app and complaining, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't want to bring you back." And this guy was very offended.
Wow.
So that's another thing you deal with on the ships, and they have some high rollers and people are regulars, and they're not afraid to complain. But they're generally, I haven't had any problems. They've been very generous with their reviews on me, and I know that's helped. Carnival does a rating system. I think I saw some scores one time, and that helps you get booked. So the general rule is, know the ship line you want to work for ahead of time. If they want you to be all clean or have a mix, have enough time before you submit. Some people are, oh man, I really want to do cruise lines. I heard it's good money and the audiences are great. Yeah, I got a great hour. Yeah, but these guys, we're doing three or four 30-minute sets. You need a couple hours.
Yeah.
So it's that's what makes it a little more challenging than a club, but also you grow a lot more. I come back on land, and a land gig to me is a lot easier because I've just been doing the reps and the heavy lifting on the ships.
So if I wanted to do, because what if I don't want to do explicit? What if I like only doing clean? Is there cruise ships that would be prefer me to do that? Because I don't, I know you could sprinkle in a little dirty to your clean stuff and make it a little spicier, whatever. But what if you just want to stick to clean?
The higher end cruise lines would be like Holland, kind of here. Princess would be pretty clean. Then there's Oceana, and I think Crystal or something. But some of those ones are so foofy, like you have to wear a suit like every time you go to dinner. Most people aren't going to want to do that. It's very specialized, Right. But yeah, that's where the agent comes in handy and say, hey, here, I've got 2 good 30-minute clean sets or 3 30-minute, and I don't want to work adult. I like doing clean. And then they, the agent, if they like your material, they find the fit for you.
I love that. I'm waiting on mine because I do want to do cruise ships. I want to do dry bar first, right? That gives you a leg of saying and you have that clip of that video to go and show to everybody, like, hey, this is what I have. It's 25, so you're good to go. And then they say, okay, I have this 25. I also have all this other material. This is my great 25 that I'm sending to you. Then you can do cruise ships and other things like that. So that's my goal. I've only been doing stand up. Well, if you knock off COVID time, 6 years. If you keep COVID time, 8 years, right? So still a pup in the comedy world type thing,
But I mean, if you did Zoom shows during COVID, and I did a few, not a lot. I mean, those were almost worth a month of comedy just each Zoom show because they were so different.
It felt like it, man. Those Zoom shows. I did a few of them too, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm like, please let this go away very soon. This is very hard.
I emceed a conference and I had to do intros and then comedy break and then more intro. It was just like, I had notes all over I'm trying to make sure I'm hitting the mute button and unmute. It's like, it was exhausting. It was the most work I've ever done related to comedy.
They're tough, man. They're tough. I am so glad to be back on the road. I'm so glad to be back in clubs and doing shows and constantly going out and doing that stuff. It's one of my favorite things. If you could go back in time and give your younger self, when you're starting comedy, give your younger self one piece of advice. Just say, hey, Mark, do this thing and your career will be better, or you'll have more fun, or whatever it is. What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh man, that's a great question. Well, see, my circumstance would probably do it before you get married and have a family, and you probably would have moved to LA or New York. Probably would have gone to New York. I just like, even though I'm a West Coast comic, I just love the pace there and the getting up, and those audiences are super receptive. You're doing good, and they let you know if they don't like you.
Yeah.
And I think it's just getting that honest feedback. I would have done a way more structured. And what else? No, probably not that much, because I started out working clean, and that really helped me out. I probably would have done some better job on networking. I don't think I've done enough time promoting and networking, but I started doing comedy, and I used to send press packets. I'd spray paint the stick-on stuff and put my picture on the front of a folder with a bio, and I think I even sent VHS for the first couple of years of comedy. This big old packet, yeah. So I would say it would probably engage on social media more, what littler was back then, and work that to try to stay a step ahead of people, and probably doing a little better job on networking, because it's really a lot about relationship and comedy. You can be funny, and so much of it is just perception. And I think most of the time, the business eventually brings the talented people to the top. But I've seen some really talented guys just buried and not break through. I'm like, why isn't this guy famous? I mean, I've worked with a couple of cruise ship guys like this. This guy, every joke, I'm just laughing my head off. I'm like, it seems a little unfair, but it's a numbers game.
Yeah. After watching like the Comedy Store documentary and reading all that stuff and talking to Wayne Fetterman about history of comedy. I'm like, man, did I miss the heyday of comedy? Did I miss that time of like you could go do the road, a bunch of one night gigs? There was now I forgot the famous one up north. You could go get on
Triple
I guess
runs.
the triple runs. Yeah, you could
I
go
did
to the triple
those.
runs.
Yeah, that's
They
where I
don't-
cut my teeth. If it wasn't for David Tribble, I wouldn't be doing comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to get him on the podcast. We just haven't connected.
Well, yeah, you've got to. He's great.
I
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
but he doesn't do it anymore. COVID hit
Oh,
and the triple
that
runs
was done.
died off. And
But
I'm
I mean,
like,
just to get the stories. I mean, the guys he had on, he had a lot of heavy hitters do his runs, and that, yeah, those, I think as good as clubs were, then all these smaller bars and stuff like, oh, they're making the city is comedy boom. We got to do comedy. Everyone just, all of a sudden there's a comedy night. And I think it's cyclical. I think this is the new comedy boom right now. You got wineries doing lots of comedy shows. You got breweries, you got clubs that are, they're running the main room. They all have a secondary room. Now they all have produced shows. They have, book shows. So I think we're in the second wave. I mean, it's almost oversaturation. It's almost too much, but I don't think it'll swallow itself up. I don't think it's a black hole comedy.
no. And I think we're actually right now maybe a great moment of comedy because we just have the writer strike and the actor strike. So we're going to be putting content out or getting movies or TV shows made is now delayed by months, maybe even years now. We may not see the growth.
Content for people to go to right now.
Yeah. So it might be the only game in town for a little while where now comedy can have a big boom. And maybe that becomes one of those things again where, comedians they come back from this and they go, hey, these guys have been doing shows and whatever. We can just develop a sitcom around there. We can develop a show around there. We can develop a movie around them because they already have material and we just, boom, we're there.
No, that's James. That's very prescient, man. Because you think about what are all these, as much as it's painful for the writers and the actors, all these studio people, they're sitting on their thumbs now. They're probably searching around. Who are we going to bring back? What's going to be new and fresh when things pick up? And like, they're probably scrolling. They're checking the Instagram feeds and TikTok and YouTube. So yeah, get your content out there and and try to keep it quality and just keep it in circulation. That's what I try to do. Yeah,
exactly. Well, Marc, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Do you have anything coming out anytime soon? New specials, books, albums, any of that kind of stuff that people can check out?
Yeah, I have a Punchline Records. Matthew Lane is editing a new album now that I recorded at Alameda Comedy Club. So hopefully that'll be out in the next couple months. And people can find my website has all my Instagram links, TikTok, etc. Laugh with Marc, LAUGHWITHMARC. My parents call it laughwithmarc.com.
And I'll put that all in the show notes and link it out there. And Marc does have comedy albums, you guys. So I know there's two of them that I know of. Is there more? Is there just the two?
Let's see. One I still sell. I don't know if I can get Mark My Words is a self-produced one. Then I have another one on Uproar Records, Chuckalicious.
Yep.
And then Dry Bar Comedy. If you go to my webpage, they can watch my special for free with a few ads. But yeah.
And it's great. It's fantastic. Marc is amazing. This is the best thing about Dry Bar is I feel like it's almost like the digital version of Johnny for clean comedians. Like if you get a Dry Bar, it can blow up your career. Jeff Allen's career blew up again. Brad Upton, like this, it's such a big thing, and people find it and they go, "This is amazing," and it's so shareable. The way that they did it, it makes it so shareable that you can go viral real fast, and people are just watching your stuff, and you get booked from that. I know people, but I don't know if this happened to you. I'm going to ask you now. Did you get calls when your Dry Bar came out? Did people start like emailing you or, hey, when you come into my town? Hey, can I book you? That kind of stuff.
I started getting some messages, saw your thing, and it was fun. Yeah, my quick Dry Bar story, I know where sign up. I get like 2.5 million in the first week views.
Wow.
Then it flatlined. So I've done okay. It's like, I don't know what the algorithm or what happened. It's like, oh, I'm all set. I'm going to go Brad Upton. Nah, not quite. I'm okay, but it's just it's good to have, and I think you're on the right path. You get that stepping stone on your way to the top of the comedy game, and I wish you success with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. That means a lot, actually. So guys, I'll put all the show notes for Marc's stuff in there. Thank you so much for listening. Please go like, subscribe, go check out Marc's stuff. Go watch some of his YouTube. Watch the YouTube videos of this and the clips that I'm cutting out from this. I'm figuring out how to cut up clips from the podcast. Put it on there. It's amazing. I'm learning so much. I keep growing every time I see something, I see somebody doing something, I go, okay, let's try this. Let's dip our toe in the water and see how we move forward here. And it's been a great thing. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for watching. Check it out. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.